Here's the script. I am a first-time mom, and this was a planned and wanted pregnancy. I am still trying to process the last 72 hours, which has caused me significant trauma and distress. I'm writing this out publicly to warn other mothers. This happened in Texas. I am currently 9 weeks and 1 day pregnant. I have been in the ER a couple of times for severe 24/7 nausea, which is triggering significant panic attacks. The nausea is the worst at night, keeping me from sleeping, which makes the anxiety worse. Plus, I'm unable to keep down food and liquids. It's been seriously horrible. My first 2 ER doctors, both women, were at separate ER locations and both gave me hydration. One gave me Zofran and sugar, but then I had issues with the Zofran backing me up. I had another bad night of puking and panic attacks and called my mom in the morning, crying because I was so miserable. She said she would go to a different ER with me, one that was a full hospital with OBs on staff. When I got there, I explained the situation to a male ER doctor who spoke with me for less than 5 minutes. I told him my issues with waking up with nausea, then the panic attacks, then sleeping. I told him that the panic attacks combined with everything scared me and made me not want to be pregnant anymore. But I made it clear I just wanted relief and had no plan on hurting myself or anyone else. He refused to give me any medication, not even an IV bag to help with fluids. He sent a social worker to talk to me about the panic attacks and said she could find a facility that would take me and could help with medication and sleep, etc. I said okay, because I was so desperate at that point and had been in the ER for hours with no help whatsoever. He never even called OB. I haven't seen mine yet at all. I haven't even had an ultrasound. I got sent to the new clinic, and by the time I got through processing, it was 3 a.m. I was crying because I was having high anxiety and hadn't slept. They never gave me my nighttime medications or anything. I finally went to bed around 4 a.m., and then they woke me back up at 6 a.m. to do my vitals and said I needed to go itemize my belongings. Once I woke up, the nausea hit me immediately, and I asked for Zofran, which they refused because I had to see the internal medicine doctor first. I didn't get Zofran until 10:30 a.m., at which point I had missed breakfast and was nonstop puking. But the doctor would only allow one male pill every 12 hours. I was so sick. Eventually, I was seen by a psychiatrist who I thought would be able to help me with meds, but he said no. I can't take anything because I'm pregnant and I'd have to talk to a different doctor who wasn't going to be in until Monday. This was on Saturday. At that point, I freaked out because now I'm away from home. They aren't giving me my over-the-counter meds like Unisom and B6 for nausea or my prenatals, and they're not giving me enough Zofran to keep the nausea at bay. I said I wanted to leave then, as I was there voluntarily, and the doctor was mad and said I'd have to sign an AMA form and he'd place me on a 24-hour hold where the other doctor would talk to me before the 24 hours and determine if they'd try to get a court order to keep me. I was so shocked. I asked if there was any way I could talk to someone, as I didn't want to stay, and they were holding me involuntarily at that point. He said no. I'm a panicky, sick mess after this, and go through all the paperwork they gave me, which included the Patient Bill of Rights, which stated patients had the right to be discharged within 4 hours of request, unless the doctor believed I was a danger to myself or others, or that I was mentally unable to make medical decisions for myself. I requested a written justification from the doctor outlining which of those reasons he was using to justify the 24-hour hold, and he refused. He just kept saying I wasn't allowed to leave until I spoke with the other doctor who wasn't going to be in until the next day. At around 3:30, my mom and fiancé came for visitation, and I brought my paperwork with me and showed them the patient rights documents. They were pissed, so they stayed 2.5 hours after visitation and argued with them to release me so I could go home since they weren't even treating me anyway and withholding medications. The doctor refused to talk to my family, even though I specifically included them on my medical release forms. So they had a right to request that information and were requesting a justification for keeping me there past the 4 hours. It got so bad my mom even called the cops and filed a police report. They refused to let me go, so I had to stay another night without Zofran and couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't keep food or water down. There was no doctor on staff at the time, so when the nurses called to get my Zofran prescription increased, the doctor didn't answer and they couldn't do anything for me. I could tell the nurses were trying their best and were very frustrated for me. The original doctor came back an hour before the 24 hours were up and clearly did not want to talk to me. I think the other doctor said he wasn't getting involved because it was turning into a legal situation at that point. He was super short with me, and when I requested justification for the 24-hour hold, he said the ER doctor said I didn't want to be pregnant anymore and used that as justification. I'm absolutely floored at this point. He didn't want to speak further about the issue and discharged me, but apparently no one knew how to discharge me because it's the weekend, so it took another few hours to even leave. The whole situation was so miserable, and I legitimately feel traumatized by the experience. I still feel like I need help with the nausea and panic attacks, but I'm scared to go back to the ER now. It's been so horrible, and I don't know what to do besides talk to my OB at my upcoming appointment and hope she's more understanding of my problems. I'm going to file complaints with the hospital and the state regarding what happened. I am also going to consult with a few lawyers to see if I have a case against them. This whole experience has left me feeling incredibly hopeless and frustrated with the medical system. I feel like I was punished for saying I didn't want to be pregnant anymore. As for me, I am currently staying at my mom's. I was able to finally get some rest and take enough Zofran and Unisom and B6 to keep the puking at bay for a bit. I'm trying my best to keep my cool and avoid a panic attack. I appreciate any advice anyone could give on how to navigate this situation. Now for a few comments. The original poster said, I really wanted to move out of Texas before I got pregnant because I was so worried for those exact reasons. Doctors are too afraid to treat pregnant women here, and it's safer for them to do nothing, even if it's more detrimental to the mother and baby, than prescribe something and be held legally liable if something were to happen. It's a horrible, horrible byproduct of the current baby unaliving ban. Then they added, it's really hard to convey just how traumatizing it was with only words. I was taken away from my supportive fiancé and family to be basically held prisoner and denied medication while I couldn't stop vomiting. I was around strangers, had paper-thin scrubs, and a small blanket. The vomiting caused my throat to burn, and I pulled a muscle in my neck, so it was hard to even move my head. I just cannot overstate how much worse this situation has become, and the amount of physical and emotional damage it's caused. I genuinely felt so bad for the other patients there who clearly needed help. The doctor was so obviously uninterested and uncaring. It's hard for me to see how anyone there is getting the appropriate care level they need, or how being there would make anyone less suicidal. It seems like the hospital is there to fill beds and extract as much money out of insurance as possible, while running a skeleton crew of workers who provide the minimum legal requirement of care. I will say the nurses there were great, but the facility and doctors themselves were an actual nightmare. Thank you. My mom is actually a retired police officer and works in records at a neighboring police department here, and she told them the same thing. They became very clammy, and I think realized the situation was turning into a legal one and stopped really communicating with me or my family beyond what was absolutely required. I do agree with you fully. I am going to see what my OB does and says at my appointment tomorrow, then go from there. I am scared and nervous. It's hard at the moment because I also feel too weak to even advocate for myself properly. I'm too exhausted to fight at the moment, so I'm hoping my support system will help me get through this and be tough for me. I will eventually come forward with my story. I really want to speak with a lawyer first and make sure all my ducks are in a row. I am also a semi-notable person in a niche field and am not public with my pregnancy and take my privacy very seriously. One of the nurses at the hospital even recognized me, which was also horrible in its own way. I'm sorry you also had to experience that. At one point, I was laying on the bathroom floor wondering if I was going to die there. I was worried they were going to take me to court and force me to stay there longer without treatment and without my family. I'm not sure how I will eventually recover from this, but I know I have no other option than forward, and things will eventually get better. If my fiancé and I have to empty our life savings to get me to another state for appropriate care, then we will do everything we can. That's the thing. If they had been providing me with medications and monitoring me, I would actually understand and probably wouldn't have left. But they weren't providing me with any treatment. I was having active panic attacks, and I didn't even get a, hey, try these breathing exercises. They were just holding me hostage and denying me care. That's not true. There are plenty of medications that treat anxiety that are safe during pregnancy. Having constant panic attacks and not being able to keep down food or water is not safe for pregnancy or the baby either. You have to weigh the risks of each decision you make. I also suffer from ulcerative colitis, which is triggered by stress. I am off my UC medication because it's not safe during pregnancy. I almost lost my colon during my last flare, which lasted a year and a half, and I was on steroids for 7 months to help control the inflammation, which would absolutely not be safe for pregnancy. These conditions can quickly become life-threatening. I didn't request an ultrasound. I simply stated that I hadn't even had one yet. The reason I wanted to work with someone in OB was because it was clear the ER doctors were uncomfortable treating me because I was pregnant, and I thought an OB would be more knowledgeable in which medications are safest for pregnancy. Another reason I mentioned the ultrasound was because the reason for denying any medication was pregnancy. However, I wasn't even sure if the pregnancy was progressing correctly. It's my first pregnancy, and my mother has a history of missed miscarriages where the baby stops developing, but her body didn't start the physical process of expelling everything. Hopefully, that adds more context. I am not familiar with the medical system, and this is my first pregnancy. So I don't think it's unreasonable for me to think maybe someone with more experience treating pregnant patients in a state with very tight restrictions would be a better fit for me in that moment. I personally think this is wildly unbelievable, but it happened to me. I have no prior history of psychiatric hospitalization. I take Buspro and Zoloft. I developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months due to my ulcerative colitis, which was well managed before pregnancy. The constant vomiting triggers my anxiety, leading to panic attacks. To be clear, I was not involuntarily held. I went voluntarily because the social worker said they'd be able to help me with medication and sleep. The psych facility knew they had no reason to keep me, therefore could not obtain a court order. If they believed I was actually a danger to myself or others, then they would have gone this route, but they didn't. My nurse there said he believed I did not belong there. He even told my family that and fought to get me released. I understand you're making a judgment based on your experience and knowledge, but I hope you could put yourself in my shoes as someone with very limited knowledge of the medical system and going through my first pregnancy. Our thought processes and reasoning are probably going to be vastly different. I did what I thought was the best thing to do in my situation, and it turned into a nightmare. I'm sorry if my story isn't believable to you, but I'm still going to do what I can to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again in the future. And to be clear, the reason I went to different ERs was because the first one was a standalone private ER, like CarePoint or something, and the ER doctor recommended going to one with a hospital and OB attached next time. So the next time I went to a Baylor ER hospital, which I mistakenly thought was a full hospital, but it was some type of hybrid situation. I am not originally from Texas, so I'm not familiar with the hospitals around here. The next one I went to was an ER at a full hospital. To add more context, they had asked me if I had a history of panic attacks, and I explained that I did. I had developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months due to my ulcerative colitis. They asked what I would do in those situations to avoid triggers, etc. Before, my panic attacks were focused mainly on social situations or being too far from a bathroom, etc. So to avoid triggers, I do things like change my diet or avoid situations where there was no bathroom. But now my trigger was the pregnancy symptoms, which I can't avoid because I can't not be pregnant anymore. I said the panic attacks and nausea made me not want to be pregnant, which I believe was misconstrued. But I think there's some pretty crazy implications of saying any pregnant woman who says they don't want to be pregnant anymore can be held involuntarily at a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, I would have been more than happy to stay there. But because I wasn't really being given any further treatment, I just wanted to go home to my family and support system. If I was going to be vomiting, I'd prefer to do it in my own toilet. I was also worried about missing my OB appointment if they decided to hold me longer. The original ER doctor did not have enough to send me there involuntarily, and the psych at the facility openly admitted he believed the ER doctor misled me and was the one to tell me to fill out the AMA, but placed me on a 24-hour hold because it was their policy, which I had pointed out contradicted Texas state law for patients who were there voluntarily. This facility has been open for only 10 months or so, and one nurse said it's very rare that someone would come there voluntarily but then request to leave so quickly. But I think a lot of those voluntary patients have been through that system before, so know what to expect. First, I had no clue. When I pointed out the 4-hour release requirement in the documents they gave me, they didn't even know that it was in there. They said all patients get a 24-hour hold, and they've never released someone within 4 hours. I meet with my OB tomorrow, so hopefully I'll get some better support there. Thanks for listening. It's so scary. One girl at the facility I spoke to had been there 3 times for suicidal thoughts. She said she believed the facility wasn't supportive for patients who have disabilities or are pregnant. She mentioned that one time her roommate had dementia and was clearly not taking care of her hygiene or herself at all, and she tried to advocate for the woman, but the woman received no help. The facility is new, open for only about 10 months, and I think they're trying to accept anyone to fill beds, even if they aren't properly equipped to care for them. I think a lot of these people don't have the wherewithal or the family support to advocate for them either, so nothing ever gets done, and no one is held accountable. It's a nightmare situation and has been incredibly eye-opening. The social worker said that they were originally going to try to get me into one of the private rooms that they had at the hospital, but came back later and said the psychiatrist, I assume, denied me. So she said she was going to call some other places and see if she could get me into one of them. Maybe 2 hours later, she came back and said she found a place that would accept me. This new place was indeed a locked facility. They have only been open for 10 months and seem to be accepting everyone. There were two other individuals who were admitted at the same time from the same hospital. One, I believe, was there for alcohol withdrawal, and the other expressed thoughts of unalived. The first ER doctor just seemed really busy and didn't want to deal with me. Then the psych at the facility was just the on-call doctor and clearly didn't want to be there and kept saying he couldn't release me until I spoke with the attending who wasn't there because it was the weekend. I don't think they've ever had anyone challenge them on the 4-hour rule, as the place has only been open for 10 months. I was in a locked psychiatric hospital. No, you cannot just get up and walk out. Now for the update 2 days later. First, I'd like to say thank you for the outpouring of support. It really means a lot to me. I'm going to start with a very small update, and then at the end, I'm going to answer some questions and clear up some misconceptions about what happened. Update. I did see my new OBGYN and had my first ultrasound. My little guy is measuring right on time and had a heartbeat of 167. I feel overwhelmed with relief, knowing he is safe in there and doing well. I explained the whole situation to my OB, and she was incredibly understanding. She gave me a new prescription of Zofran and took some labs while I was there to check my electrolytes and probably some other things. I'll have another follow-up with her soon. At this point, I feel comfortable enough working with her, so that's my current plan. As for complaints and legal stuff, there isn't much movement on that front due to the holiday, but I still have every intention to pursue those options and will try to update as I can. Now the other stuff. I did not expect that post to gain as much attention as it did. It was cross-posted many times, and the responses were overwhelmingly sympathetic, but there was a ton of skepticism, especially from doctors who read it. But hey, it's the internet, so that's to be expected, I guess. At the end of the day, I don't need any strangers online to believe what happened to me, because I have recourse in real life, and that's ultimately what matters. I was accused of changing my story, but I think that was mainly from people who skimmed my post. So below I'm going to clear up some things and provide some additional details, not because I have to, but because I think if there's going to be discourse about my experience, I wanted to start from a place of accuracy of timeline and events. Starting with, at no point was the court involved with the decision-making process. I went to the ER willingly. They made it seem like they were not equipped to help my situation, and that the other facility would be able to help me with my sleeping and panic attacks. I was so run down by the time the social worker came to my room that I'd have agreed to go anywhere they said would provide me with relief. I went to the new facility voluntarily of my own free will. There was no 72-hour hold. When I mentioned 72 hours in my last post, I meant that the whole situation from going to the ER to leaving the new facility took place over 72 hours. Once I got to the new facility and met with the doctors, I realized that I was not in the right place to get the care I personally needed. I was away from my support system, not being given the proper medication to control my vomiting, my anxiety was significantly heightened, and I was not being given any additional treatment or resources. So to me, there was no point in me being at the facility, and it was indeed making my situation undoubtedly worse. After speaking with the on-call psychiatrist, he told me that he thought the ER doctor misled me, and that I'd need to sign an AMA form, which would place me on a 24-hour hold. It was clear he did not want to be the one to discharge me, and insisted I needed to speak with the attending. He mentioned the possibility of a court order, but said it was unlikely they'd get one for my case. After that conversation, I went to review the paperwork they gave me during admission. I found the Patient Bill of Rights, which stated that for voluntary patients, they had a right to be released within 4 hours of their request. Unless 1, I changed my mind and wanted to stay. 2, I was under the age of 16, and my guardian didn't want to release me. Or 3, if the doctor has reason to believe that I might meet the criteria for court-ordered services or emergency detention, because 1, I'm likely to cause serious harm to myself, 2, I'm likely to cause serious harm to others, or 3, my condition will continue to deteriorate, and I am unable to make informed decisions as to whether or not to stay for treatment. After I read that, I brought the papers to the nurses and requested a justification from the psychiatrist for the 24-hour hold. I wanted to know which reasons he was using. The psychiatrist did not provide a reason or justification beyond the attending needing to evaluate me. That's it. To be clear, this is illegal. They had zero reason to keep me past the 4 hours. At no time had I indicated I was a threat to myself or others, not verbally or written on any of the questionnaires that I had filled out during admissions. The attending not working that day is not a legal justification to hold me. Their schedule does not supersede my rights as a patient. Now, after the 24 hours was up, the original on-call doctor came back to discharge me. He was clearly agitated that the attending refused to come in to do the discharge, so I never at any point spoke with the attending who was originally assigned to me. The on-call doctor did not seek a court order to detain me. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes or less. When I asked again for the justification to keep me, he asked me if I said anything to the ER doctor about wanting to end my pregnancy, and I told him I just said I didn't want to be pregnant because I was so miserable. I then tried to ask if he believed that was enough justification for the hold, but he cut me off. It was clear he didn't want to engage in any further conversation. My concern here was the implications of legally being allowed to involuntarily commit any woman who said she didn't want to be pregnant anymore, which seems insane to me. But I digress. To answer questions about the facility, why didn't I just leave? Because this was a locked facility. I couldn't just get up and walk out of the door. How were they able to take me so fast? This facility has been open only for 10 months. They had beds and empty rooms available when I was there. I had 3 separate ER visits over 4 weeks. The first ER was a standalone clinic, not associated with a larger hospital. The doctor there advised me to go to an ER attached to a hospital with L&D. The second time, I mistakenly went to a hybrid ER hospital that didn't have L&D. The third ER was attached to a full hospital. I wasn't doctor shopping. I'm just not familiar with the hospital systems here. Regarding ultrasounds and OBs, I never requested an ultrasound during any of my ER visits. I mentioned the ultrasound in the original post to state I hadn't had one or been evaluated by an OB yet. My mother has a history of missed miscarriages, so I thought it could be a possibility. If I was being denied medication for being pregnant, I hoped for a viable pregnancy. But again, I didn't request an ultrasound. I am not and have never considered a DIY baby unaliving. I have the resources to fly anywhere for appropriate medical care if needed. Both my fiancé and I work high-paying remote tech jobs and could move out of state if necessary. It's not ideal, but it's an option, even if just to get care in a better medical system outside Texas. Medications I'm currently taking: Male 10, Bisoprone twice a day, Male 50, Zoloft, Zofran, Unisom plus B6, prenatals, no benzos. Whether or not you agree with the doctor's actions, the facility was not the right place for me. They were not equipped to handle my pregnancy symptoms, were understaffed, and provided no additional treatment that I wasn't getting at home. There was no reason for me to be there, and it made things worse. I hope people can learn from my experience. Thank you for the support and DMs. I'm sorry for the similar stories I've read. It seems like there's a bigger issue here, and I hope others find peace too. I will continue to work with my OB, psychiatrist, and hopefully a therapist to unpack this situation. I'll try to update as I can, but the complaint and legal process will likely be slow. If you know any attorneys in the DFW area interested in this case, please DM me their information so I can follow up. I'll try to answer any additional questions in the comments in case there's anything else I'm forgetting. Am I the idiot for refusing to let my cheating ex and his mistress near our kids? I had been together with my husband for nearly 10 years. We got married at 21, had our first son a year after, followed by our daughter 3 years later. I built my whole life around my family. We got good jobs. He worked full-time. I worked from home. We had a good home in a great neighborhood, and we put our children in good schools. We also had a successful business on the side. I thought we did everything right. My best friend, since we were in middle school, lived close. We had our daughters around the same time, and we'd have playdates all the time. We leaned on each other a lot. I gave her all the support when she was going through issues with her daughter's deadbeat father and got her in contact with a good lawyer. I leaned on her when I was recovering from my traumatic second birth and the depression that followed. We leaned on each other for everything. 10 months ago, I found out I was pregnant for the 3rd time. I was really uneasy about this because of my traumatic experience the 2nd time. Also, my husband and I both agreed we were done after our 2 children. I considered baby unaliving, but my husband insisted we keep it. I was still uneasy about the pregnancy and borderline miserable for the next 6 months. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum and was throwing up 20 times a day for 6 months straight. I lost a ton of weight, had to stop working, and was sent to the hospital frequently due to severe dehydration. My husband stood by me and showered me with attention, for which I was so grateful. He cut down his hours at work to look after me, the house, and the kids. My best friend would come to our home frequently to check on me and also help with the house. When I hit 6 months, the hyperemesis gravidarum decreased a lot, and I was almost back to myself. One night, after having a movie night with my family, my husband and I were getting ready to sleep. He fell asleep right away while I quickly checked on the kids before getting into bed. His phone was vibrating like crazy, so out of genuine curiosity, I unlocked his phone. We used to do this a lot when we were younger, so I didn't think too much of it. I was already sitting in bed. I saw messages from my friend. They were frantic spam messages. One of them said, "Please come over, I need you." Another said, "I know I shouldn't be messaging here, but I miss you, and come over when she's asleep." I think I was there in a daze for nearly 5 minutes. I cried a lot quietly, and the fatigue kind of left me. I scoured his phone looking for more. I saw emails and DMs from them both, even using apps like Kik to message, and the pictures. But the worst part was finding out my husband left me one time in the hospital with my mother while he went back home, where my kids were being babysat by my friend, and got intimate in our bedroom with our kids in the house. I kicked him out the following morning after confronting him and filed for separation sometime after. For the next 2 months, he had been begging for forgiveness, then complaining and insulting me that I'm not letting him see his kids, or that I'm stopping him from going with me to doctor appointments, which I had been. We had planned months earlier about who was going to be in the labor room. It was going to be my mother and husband. He called me when I was 35 weeks, questioning the labor situation. At this point, he had moved in with my ex-friend's house shortly before this call. I said no, and he got very angry. Lots of my in-laws and family members told me to put our differences aside for our baby. I still said no. I gave birth to my son with my mother and sister present and didn't feel any regret about my choice. After my second traumatic birth, I just wanted to make sure this one was as stable as possible, which it was. We were going to name our child after his father who passed away. I went along with it to make him happy, but changed my mind and picked a name I had always loved since childhood. This aggravated him even more. Am I wrong? Because I'm being guilt-tripped by many people right now. All I want is for everyone to leave me alone and for me to just be with my kids. Just wanted to add that I do let him see the kids. That would be crazy if I didn't. My children love their dad. I just have certain boundaries now that we aren't together, and he doesn't respect them. He gets angry and says things that are categorically not true. He got to meet our newborn son hours after I gave birth. Now for the update. I'm back after nearly a whole year. I completely forgot about this post because I've been so wrapped up in other things. For anyone who doesn't want to read the whole post, here's a summary. My husband had been cheating on me with my best friend while I was pregnant. I was close to giving birth and decided not to have my then husband in the labor room with me. I also chose a name for our baby that he didn't agree with. Like I said, it's basically been a whole year. My baby turned 1 today, and after celebrating his birthday and Christmas with my kids, it finally hit me. This is my new reality. First of all, my ex-husband and I finally went through with the divorce proceedings. I had been holding it off during my pregnancy and early postpartum period to avoid added stress and to carefully plan for my children and myself. I was awarded primary physical custody of our children. Their dad visits once a week, and the 2 older kids spend every other weekend with him. My youngest will start doing the same in a couple of months, which makes me nervous. He's especially clingy with me. All my kids are. But my youngest has really only known me as the most present parent. One of the main stipulations in our custody agreement is that my ex's affair partner is prohibited from seeing the kids. My poor kids have been confused enough by their parents' sudden split, and I didn't want them even more confused by seeing their aunt, their Eshen, who is supposed to be mommy's best friend, with their dad. It was deemed emotionally detrimental in court. As for the baby name, he's been so bitter about it. I think he's still mad about it. His side has been trying to convince me to change the name to something we'd both like, especially after the divorce was finalized. But it's been a year now, and the baby quite literally answers by the name I gave him, so I'm not going to be changing it. He was also unhappy with the child support payments, among other payments, and asked for some revisions. One main thing he asked to change was the cost of our kids' school tuition. He pays for their tuition, which he felt was too much and too harsh, but the court stuck with the original payments. As for my ex-husband and ex-best friend, they continued dating. I found out that they had started seeing each other a month into my 3rd pregnancy. They had actually slept together during my 2nd pregnancy, but didn't pursue a relationship then because, as they put it, they weren't ready to ruin things and didn't want to hurt anybody. My ex's side has been very supportive of their relationship, even inviting her to holiday gatherings like Thanksgiving or family holidays. Because of this, my kids don't go very often to these events. I don't know. After this whole fiasco, I'm coming to the realization that perhaps my ex's side never really liked me all that much. But that's okay. I eventually spoke with my ex-best friend to ask why they did it. She claimed that they were just friends but grew close while she was dealing with issues involving her deadbeat ex-boyfriend. Both of them insisted that my ex-husband just wanted to protect her, which supposedly turned into love. Hearing this hurt me a lot, but at the same time, I felt relieved to know the truth. When I sat with this information for a while, it stopped hurting. It made me realize that I didn't still love my ex-husband and could finally let go of him and their betrayal. They broke up a week ago. Apparently, it's just a break, though who knows. Although my kids go to their dad's house every other weekend, it has helped a lot with making time for myself. Obviously, I'm figuring out who I am without being a wife or mom all the time. In many ways, I find what happened to be a true blessing, which is why I'm no longer angry. As for me, I've been seeing someone, it hasn't been very long, but we get along great. Initially, my ex-husband made the whole situation difficult. He didn't want me to have any man, specifically around the kids. Am I the idiot for cutting ties with my vegan friend after she slapped me during a confrontation about her entitled behavior? I was wondering if I was the one at fault here. I love cooking and hosting. All of us, including me, are Muslim, and we all eat halal meat. One of my friends became vegan last year. When we go out for meals, we try to accommodate her by going to places that offer vegan food, which limits our choices, since most places serving halal food don't cater well to vegan diets. After moving to a new place, I invited friends over for dinner. I called my vegan friend beforehand, asking what she would like me to make and what brand she preferred. I assured her I'd cook everything separately to avoid cross-contamination. The food was served, and she liked it. Another friend brought homemade cheesecake for dessert, which her mom made. I had already prepared a vegan dessert for my vegan friend, so I assumed there wouldn't be an issue. However, she had a meltdown and screamed at the person who brought the cheesecake. I asked her to calm down and not raise her voice in my house. She took offense, left, and said I didn't appreciate her. For a whole year, we catered to her dietary choices and places to eat out. Later, we decided as a group that we couldn't let her selfish antics affect us. In a group chat, we discussed going out in 2 weeks to a new halal buffet opening in town, which we confirmed had vegan options. My vegan friend objected, so I suggested that next time she could bring her own food, and we could enjoy eating out. Was I wrong? Now for the update. After the incident, I created a new WhatsApp group with all my friends except the vegan one to discuss what happened and what to do moving forward. We all agreed that we had enabled her behavior by being too accommodating and that she was rude. Someone suggested I have a one-on-one chat with her to see if there were underlying issues, as her outburst was unlike her. She can be self-centered but had never been that rude before. I agreed to the suggestion, but told the group I'd keep the chats as backup in case she accused me of bullying her, and she would know it wasn't just me. I texted her and asked her to meet me at my place. The reason was to prevent a public meltdown, and so I could ask her to leave if she crossed the line. My husband agreed to wait outside in the car so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable, as she wears a headscarf, and we usually meet as girls only so those who wear headscarves can take them off. She agreed to come. We met, and after greeting, I asked her up front if there were any issues. She was taken aback and asked why. I informed her that what happened last time was unlike her and asked if she was having a hard time. She initially denied it, but then burst into tears. She had argued with her fiancé about her future mother-in-law. She's the only vegan in the family and wanted the wedding menu to be all vegan. In our culture, the groom pays for the wedding, and her mother-in-law said while some of the menu could cater to vegan dishes, there would also be non-vegan options for others. Her mother-in-law stated that it wasn't up for discussion since they were paying for the wedding. Her fiancé supported her, but agreed with his mom, stating she could eat what she wanted, but he wouldn't adhere to her diet at home or when eating out. I asked what happened since then. She said the relationship was shaky, and she gave him an ultimatum, either her and her views or his mother. He bluntly told her he wanted a partner who would accept both him and his family. He said if his mother disrespected her or anyone else in his family, he would defend her, but in return, she had to respect him and his family equally. I asked if her mother-in-law banned vegan food from the menu completely. She said no, there would be both options. I asked if her fiancé's family provided vegan food for her when she visited. She said yes. I told her she was selfish and only thought of herself. I said that if they hadn't accommodated her at all, I would advise her to leave the relationship. I told her we had tried to respect her choices for over a year, but we wouldn't continue doing that she was entitled, and the world doesn't revolve around her. I showed her the group chat where we all agreed that if she continued being disrespectful, she wouldn't be invited out with us anymore. I told her she needed to be grateful her fiancé was patient with her. If my husband had been rude to my mother like that, I would have ended the relationship. She raised her voice at me and suddenly slapped me. I told her to get out of my house before I called the police for attack. She said, "Who would believe you?" I then told her I had recorded our whole conversation in case she lied later. She left, and I messaged the friend group, explained what happened, and told them I was done with her. If they wanted to hang out with her, I was fine with it, but they should tell me, as I didn't want to see her. They were all shocked, and I am now grieving the loss of a friend I've known since I was 11 years old.